In this video, we are going to talk all about tension. Now, in video number 7, we already covered all of the different types of quilting techniques that you can do for your Techno Garden quilt top. So before you actually jump into quilting, I wanted to cover tension because that is one of the most common questions that I get from quilters who are struggling with quilting. It's that they just don't understand tension correctly on their machine. So we're going to cover tension so that when you go to quilt, you can spend more time quilting and have an enjoyable experience because you're not constantly troubleshooting bad stitches on your machine. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be using my sit-down quilting machine. And I like to keep a little tiny quilt sandwich on hand just to test my tension before I move to a project, because it's easier to throw away a scrap of fabric than it is to unpick stitches from your beautiful quilt top that you spent so much time piecing. So let's move to the quilting machine and talk about the two parts of tension, which is the bobbin tension and the top tension. So I have my bobbin case out of my machine here. You can see this is where my handle is for my bobbin case, and my bobbin would go in this side. Now, when I put my bobbin in my bobbin case, I always like to put it in so that when I pull the thread, the bobbin spins clockwise. I know that this is specific for my machine, so if you are wondering what way it should spin for yours, you can refer to your quilting machine manufacturer to find out if there is a specific way for it to spin. So when you put your bobbin in your bobbin case, you're going to thread it through the little gap and then go under the tension arm. Now, this little piece right here is what actually holds a specific amount of tension for your bobbin thread. And this little screw is what you will use to adjust it. So what I like to do when I am testing my bobbin case tension is what I call the drop test, which is basically this. I don't actually drop my bobbin case because it's not fun to pay for a new bobbin case if you drop this on a hard surface and it dents it or damages it. But the idea of it is that we're going to pull thread out of our bobbin case and see how much tension there is just based on gravity. So what I like to do is I hold my bobbin case flat in my hand with my bobbin side up, and I'm going to pull on my thread and just see what it does. So you can see right here, it's not lifting off of my hand, but there is enough tension that it is kind of lifting at an angle, but it's not actually coming off my hand. Now for me personally, I like my tension on both sides to be a little bit tighter, and so I'm going to tighten my screw. Before I do that, I want to talk more about tension and the way that I like to remember how to keep things balanced. I like to think of it as like a wrestling match. Now, if you were to pair a 98-pound wrestler with a sumo wrestler, it's not going to be very fun. It's obvious who's going to win, right? So think of it as your bobbin tension and your top tension having strength. And when they're equally matched in strength, that's when you get a nice, clean stitch. The idea is that the knot in the stitch should happen right in the center of our quilt instead of on the top or on the bottom. So let's go ahead and adjust our bobbin tension so that it's a little bit tighter so that we're giving it enough strength to combat with the top tension. So I have my little screwdriver here, and with the bobbin tension, it takes very small changes to affect the bobbin case's tension. So if you can see, my screw is about vertical right now. I'm going to give it not even a full quarter of a turn. I would say about an eighth of a turn. So it's not quite horizontal yet, but it's not vertical anymore. Okay, now let's go ahead and do our drop test again on our hand and see if this made any difference. Okay, this is good. So now you can see that the bobbin case did lift all the way off my hand, but it didn't come up off my hand. It didn't actually lift. So what some people like to do is set their bobbin case so that when they pull the thread, it looks like a spider coming down from a spider web. So I want to show you what that looks like. It's a little bit tighter tension than what we have now. So moving back to my little screw, now I'm going to turn this all the way to horizontal. So since the beginning of setting this tension, we've only gone a quarter of a turn. And like I said, this is very minute changes that make a big difference with your bobbin case settings. Okay, so let's do the drop test again. And I can feel it starting to subtly lift up, but it's still not coming all the way off my hand. So let's go just a little bit more. I'm going to do another about 1/8 of a turn. So if you can see here, I am almost at a vertical position again, as if I've done a full half turn, but not quite. Okay, now let's go ahead and do our drop test again. Okay, so see, it's obviously lifting off my hand, and I'm just ever so slightly wiggling my fingers, and I can see that the bobbin case is sliding down that thread. So it might be a little, oh, that's pretty good. Okay, so for me personally, I like both my top and bottom tension to be on the tighter side. I also stitch with a tighter stitch per inch. So this is just me personally. It's not so important as to whether you set your bobbin case super tight or super loose. The whole idea is that you give equal strength to both your bobbin thread and your top thread. So mine's on the tighter side, which means we're probably going to have to tighten our top tension, but we'll get there when we get there. Now, I always, when I'm starting a new project or when I'm working with a new type of thread that I haven't changed the settings for my tension on my machine yet, I always start with my bobbin case. And the reason for that is twofold. So it takes very small changes in the bobbin case to affect the tension, right? So I like to get it in a good spot where I'm comfortable so that I don't have to touch it anymore. And it's kind of a pain in the butt to pull the bobbin case in and out and in and out and do the drop test over and over again while changing the top thread. So I just always get my bobbin case set where I like it, and then we're going to do all the rest of our changes from the top of our machine. So I'm going to go ahead and put my bobbin case in my machine, and we're going to do some test stitches to see just where we're at based on our bobbin case's tension. We know the strength of the bobbin case. Now it's time to find out the strength of the top thread so that we can equally match them. Okay, so I have the same exact thread in the top of my machine as I do in my bobbin case, and I'm just going to start by stitching. Well, first of all, I'll start by pulling up my thread. Okay, so I have my bobbin thread and my top thread. Okay, now I like to just start with little circles because that's usually where I see the worst tension. If I have bad tension settings, doing very tight curves or loops is going to exacerbate those bad stitches more than if I was doing a straight line. So I'm just going to do a few loops here. It really doesn't take much to kind of get an idea of what our tension is going to look like. So now I'll pull this out. All right, now if we look at the top stitches, everything looks pretty good here, right? So I could just say, oh, la-di-da, I'm going to go on quilting my quilt top. However, we need to check both sides of our fabric. And the bottom is obviously way stronger than the top thread. So anytime you see eyelashes on the bottom of your quilt, it means that your bobbin thread is stronger or pulling harder than your top tension. So instead of taking our bobbin case out and relieving some of that strength, like I said, I like tight stitches and tight tension. So now let's work on our top tension, which I'm going to adjust with this knob on top. So the difference with this knob compared to our bobbin case is that we can do much more drastic changes to see littler changes in our tension settings. So I'm going to start with a full half turn on my knob. So my fingers on top and my thumbs on bottom. And now my thumb is on top and my finger is on bottom. So I've done a full 180 degrees. Now let's see if that made any difference at all. So I'm going to do some more stitches. Okay. Pull my fabric out. And there's really no change at all. So this is what I mean by your top thread taking a lot more drastic measurements in order to change the top thread settings. I like this because I don't have to be so itty bitty careful with my changes. I can kind of crank it a couple times. So that's what we're going to do. We know that our top tension is not nearly as strong as our bobbin tension. So let's go ahead and change that. So instead of doing little quarter turns at a time and testing and quarter turns and testing, I'm going to go ahead and do a full revolution. Okay. And we'll pull our thread up again. do some more little loops. Okay, and now let's check out the bottom. All right, we still are having some dramatic eyelashes. Now you can see that my stitch length is obviously really long. If I were to slow down a little bit and not do such crazy long stitches, then our tension probably wouldn't look nearly as bad. Okay, so you can see here, just by doing a smaller stitch per inch, that helped my tension drastically. However, I want to see what the worst possible stitches are that I could get when I'm quilting, because then I know that when I'm on my best behavior while I'm quilting, I'm going to get really good looking stitches because my tension is set that well. Okay, so again, we did a full revolution with that last one and we still got eyelashes. So I'm going to really give a drastic amount of strength to my top tension so that we can really kind of line things up now. So I'm going to do half turn, and another half turn. Okay. Now I'm going to do those same big dramatic stitches that are very far apart to see if we can get eyelashes, because if we don't get eyelashes with this setting, then that means that probably when we're on good behavior with quilting, it's going to look fine. So I'm doing really kind of long stitches, but also very tight loops as well. Okay, now let's take a look here. All right, this is looking much better. Now I do see a couple tiny spots that we could consider an eyelash, but like I said, my stitches are very far apart. So now I'm gonna quilt as if I were quilting on an actual quilt top. So on good behavior, trying to manage my stitch length, not going too fast or too slow, and simulate what it would be like if I was actually taking care to quilt my quilt top nicely. And we'll see what that tension looks like. So you can see I'm going a little bit slower now, which means my stitch per inch is smaller or tighter than it was before. And I'm not just doing loops. I'm doing a quilting design that I would probably actually do on a quilt top so that I can kind of simulate what it would just really be like with tension settings that I believe are probably pretty good now. Okay. Now I am very happy with what the top of this looks like. So I think these stitches are really pretty. They're not too far apart. I would say that with my own arm regulation, I'm probably at about 12 stitches per inch. Okay, so this is the front of our quilt, and I think it looks really nice. Now let's check out the back, and it also looks really nice. I'm really proud of this. So this is kind of a deep dive into tension settings and how to set yourself up for success, because the last thing you want to do is spend the hours that we've spent piecing our Techno Garden quilt top and then ruining it with bad tension quilting. Another thing that's so important about tension with your quilting is if your tension is not set well, your stitches might come out, and that's even worse. We don't want to spend time quilting just for our quilting stitches to come out over time. We want this quilt to be loved and snuggled and used or hung on a wall, but knowing that our stitches are going to stay in. So get to your machine, refer back to video number 7 if you need to finalize however you're going to quilt your quilt top. Go to your machine, test your tension on scrap fabric before you quilt your quilt, and get to quilting, because in the next video we are going to make our binding, and that's like the very end, the grand finale to a finished beautiful quilt.